Living longer, living healthier, living better than ever before. Welcome to Mountain Pacific's Healthy Living for Life, a weekly series that gives you the information, education, and expert insight you need to become an active participant in today's ever-changing healthcare climate. Here now is today's program host.
From early adolescence throughout adulthood, driving is a symbol of independence. That's why it's so tough to take the car keys away from an older adult. If you're concerned that a loved one or a friend is becoming a danger behind the wheel, this show is for you. Having the conversation about when it's time to stop driving isn't easy, so we're hoping today's guests will help make it easier. I'm your host, Beth Brown, and this is Healthy Living for Life, a show dedicated to helping you do just that. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Healthy Living for Life. Today we're talking about when it becomes unsafe for some older drivers to be on the road. And a little later we'll also talk about some of the services available to help those folks who can't drive anymore still get to where they need to go. We'll start today though with Tammy Stefanik from the Montana Motor Vehicle Division to talk about testing requirements for older drivers. Tammy, thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's start by talking about those tests. Is there an age when drivers have to be tested more often for their driver's license?
In Montana, there's no specific age requirement. Obviously, as drivers get older, sometimes medical situations or other things come up, which may require us to require further information such as medical forms or testing, but there's no specific age in Montana at which drivers need to retest. That said, at age 75, we do issue a license for 4 years to those age of drivers and older.
Okay. And I understand there's a thing called a restricted driver's license. So for example, maybe if somebody has a little bit of vision impairment or something, is that when they would go after a restricted driver's license?
Yeah, the term actually is more a limited license as far as the restrictions that are on their license. So for example, a driver may have some limited vision issues, but they meet all other standards. So there's some additional testing that we can do and restrictions we can put on their license. So some of that might be wearing corrective lenses, daylight driving hours only, no driving in inclement weather, and sometimes even restricted speeds.
Okay. And is this test that people take to get their driver's license or renew their driver's license the same regardless of what state you're in?
So different states have different requirements. As far as standard licensing, most states' requirements are similar, whether it's vision, knowledge, or skills testing, but not every state is the exact same.
Okay, and do people have to go in person to a DMV office in order to take the test?
Yes, drivers need to come in person to an exam station.
Okay, and how often are there DMV offices in people's towns, or are they more county-based, or where do people go if they need to take that test?
We have driver license stations in almost every county in Montana, and some locations, some larger counties may have more than one. We do have a combination of permanent stations where the locations open sometimes on a daily basis, and then some of our locations are only open maybe once a week or every other week, or even sometimes once a month. And we generally travel to those stations. Okay,
and if people want to know those hours, how do they find that information, or how do they know when their office might be open?
So they can go online and look at our website. On the Motor Vehicle Division website.
Okay, and if anybody is nervous about taking the test and being able to pass it, would you have any tips for them of how could they prepare for the test to be the most successful they can be?
So for the knowledge test, everyone should study our driver's license manual. You can pick up a manual at one of our offices. It's also online, so they can go to the forms page on our website and find the manual online. We also have an app that was developed that drivers can download, and they can take practice tests.
Okay. And if someone thinks that someone they know, a family member or a friend, maybe shouldn't be driving anymore, there's something that's going on there where they may be a danger to themselves or to others, do you have any advice for those folks about what are their options or what can they do?
That's a difficult situation for anybody to come across. Obviously, it's best to talk to the person in their family if there's a situation. There is a form called a recommendation for re-exam, and we have that form online on our website. Generally, it's completed and submitted to us by medical professionals or law enforcement, but concerned friends or family may also be able to fill those forms out. When we receive them, then we take the information and look at them and determine if we need to open up a case to require a driver to go through further testing.
Okay.
Generally, that always starts with a medical form of some sort to ensure that there's no underlying medical issues that a driver may be experiencing to affect driving.
Okay. Can you give some examples of what some of those conditions or situations may be that people should contact you and maybe look into recommending somebody to retest?
Maybe there's memory issues. Maybe there's a family member notices that their parent or loved one all of a sudden has dings on their car, dents that they can't be explained. Maybe there's some mobility and flexibility issues or response times. Those sorts of situations might indicate that maybe a driver is having some medical issues and may not be safe to drive.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks so much, Tammy, for your time. We're going to take a break, but coming up next, we'll talk to the authorities about the topic of safe driving and just how important it is to hang up the car keys when it's time. Don't go away. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Healthy Living for Life. Joining us now is Sergeant Jay Nelson and Trooper Brandon Uhl of the Montana Highway Patrol. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk a little bit about older drivers maybe not being as safe as drivers as they used to be. And as we age, we're all different, but we see that decline, maybe in vision, maybe in our reaction time. Can you just start out by talking about why it is so important to be aware of some of those things and realize it might be time to hang up the car keys?
It's very important. I mean, as we get older, as you had mentioned, all of our abilities, our cognitive abilities, our physical abilities, all diminish, whether we like it or not, whether we'll admit it or not. And so we have to be aware that driving is a full-time job. We have to be aware of our surroundings. We have increased speed limits, so vehicles are going faster. We have a lot of motorcycles in Montana, so smaller profile vehicles. Mm-hmm. So we're always, driving is full time. And so with those diminished abilities, our reaction time slows, our ability to see further slows, and so we have to be careful as those abilities diminish. Our safety diminishes as well.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And so you mentioned some of those abilities. Are there warning signs people should be on the lookout for, or when do you know that it might be time and you're an unsafe driver? Maybe you could take that one, Trooper Uhl.
Some of the things they can watch for is if they're riding with the person, are they hitting the rumble strip? Are they going over the fog line? Are their reactions slow when they see the red light come up, just to take them a while to hit the brake? And then just with their health, if they're attending medical appointments with them, if there's something that they're noticing within their health that could be a factor driving, that's something they'll definitely want to watch out for.
Okay, great. And if they see something like that with a loved one or a friend and they bring it up, they have that conversation, and the conversation goes nowhere, do they report the driver, or what do they do there?
Definitely you can report the driver. You can talk to law enforcement. Many times in my career, I've had people stop by and say, could I speak with you? Talk to you about my mom or dad or uncle or aunt, and say, here's the situation. What can we do? And oftentimes we'll sit down, we'll interview them and talk to them because this is a big deal to take that driver's license. That's most of these people's existence, and we have to be very careful of, is it time to take that license or not?
And it's not easy for the families to come forward to talk to us about it, because they're taking a big part of their loved one's life away by taking the driving. But they realize the safety aspect of it outweighs them being hurt or killed or doing that to someone else.
Right, and that's most important, is trying to keep everybody safe. And I understand that there are classes specifically for seniors. Would you recommend those? Are those a good idea?
I would highly recommend them.
Okay.
If you look at it, we get 40 hours generally at the age of 15 to get a driver's license. You never get training unless you're in a professional environment like Trooper Uhl or I, ever again. And so 55 Alive is a program sponsored by AARP that can bring people in. I've taught the program many times across the state, and it's like driver's ed all over again. It's such a great refresher to really sort of make people think again of what they need to do when they're behind the wheel.
Okay, great. And have you seen instances where maybe somebody shouldn't be driving anymore, where it got to the point that it was unsafe and they should have given their keys up?
Absolutely. One case that stands out in my mind is the person had diminished physical abilities, but on top of that, they were prescribed some new medications from their doctor. And those medications with their physical ability really diminished their ability to drive safely. And that it could have been bad if I hadn't got them stopped that day.
Mine is a personal one. My grandma drove a giant white Cadillac with the plates that said, "Pardon me." And that was her existence, to drive behind the wheel, until one day she had had some eye problems. She was older. She was involved in a crash, and that's what finally stopped it. Luckily, she wasn't seriously injured in that crash, but it took that crash, that possible extreme tragic incident, for her to realize and for the family to step in and say, it's time.
Yeah. And so, Trooper Earl, maybe I could just go back to what you were saying. So were they swerving, or how did you know to pull them over before it turned into something like a crash?
So we got a citizen complaint on it. They called in the poor driving behavior. I found the vehicle, got behind it, and followed it for a while, and they were weaving within their lane. They went over the center line a few times, and at that point I made a traffic stop on them and found out that's what was the root cause of all of this.
Are there certain conditions where older people should be especially aware that may cause hazards while they're driving?
Absolutely. In this state, I mean, we have 4 distinct seasons here. Five if you want to throw in road construction, which is a big thing for an older person to drive through. There's a lot of traffic cones. I mean, at night, with diminished vision, or if they've even had cataract surgery, the oncoming lights from another vehicle. I've had a lot of people complain that they're so bright because of how sensitive their eyes are from that surgery. Snow, ice, you got to be able to react quickly in an appropriate manner to handle all those.
So I think a lot of us have heard the term a defensive driver. What is that, and should we be one?
We should all be defensive drivers. Like I said, unless you're in a professional capacity, we get 40 hours at the tender age of 15 for the rest of our lives to drive a 2,000 plus pound motor vehicle down the road at whatever speed. And defensive driving is using all your senses, keeping aware of the situation, keeping aware of other traffic, keeping aware of your inside your vehicle. All the distractions we have, from cell phones to GPS, you name it, it's a full-time job. And so driving defensively is using all of our senses and paying attention to the roadway and your vehicle.
Okay. And then we have time for one more question, I think. We talked a little bit with you, Trooper Uhl, about the conditions. What about for those folks who live in more rural areas? Are there conditions that are specific to a rural area versus more urban cities?
For sure. In a lot of the rural areas, the roadway isn't as forgiving as in town or a more urban area. There's no paved shoulders. There's way higher speeds, people entering from their driveway into a 70-mile-an-hour roadway. You got more wildlife out there. There's a lot of things in that rural area that exist that don't in the urban, and a lot of times your reaction time has to be much quicker in the rural areas due to the speed and where you're driving at.
Okay, great. And just final thought, what would you say to folks at home who know a loved one or a friend and is thinking about having that conversation? What's the advice that you would give them from, being authorities in this matter? What would you say? Although a very hard decision, the outcome could be that you're saving your loved one's life. When you feel as an adult that a family member needs to have those keys taken away, you need to step forward. And we can talk as law enforcement with those people and make the best decision for your family member. Perfect. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here today. I appreciate your time, and thanks so much for your dedicated service and your hard work. We appreciate that too. Up next, we'll learn about transportation options for folks who have hung up their keys but still need some wheels. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Sometimes giving up your car keys is the best thing you can do for yourself and for those around you, but it doesn't mean you can't still get to where you need to go. Joining us now is Mindy Deal and Linda Nolan from the Rocky Mountain Development Council. Welcome to our show, ladies.
Thank you.
Mindy, let's talk with you first. Can you just tell us a little bit about the Senior Companion Program and what that is?
Sure. The Senior Companion Program brings together volunteers aged 55 or older to help older adults with simple tasks around the home. That includes transportation. The program's goal is to help homebound seniors and older adults continue living in their home independently.
Great. Okay, and which counties in Montana is the Senior Companion Program in?
We are in 11 different counties, including Beaverhead, Broadwater, Cascade, Deer Lodge, Gallatin, Jefferson, Lewis and Clark, Madison, Park, Powell, and Silver Bow.
Okay, good. So pretty widespread.
Yes.
And so if someone needed these services or was interested in getting a senior companion and they live in one of those areas, how would they go about doing that?
They would contact Rocky Mountain Development Council at 406-447-1680 or call our 800 number at 800-356-6544 rather.
Okay, great. And we'll have that up on the screen so people can see that. And what about on the other side of that then? What if someone is interested in becoming a senior companion and volunteering for the program? How would they go about doing that?
Sure. So volunteers, again, must be 55 or older,
Okay.
And willing to volunteer 15 to 40 hours per week. They must have a valid driver's license and current liability insurance, as transportation is a big need for our program. They also must be at or below the 200% federal poverty guideline.
Okay.
Volunteers, they must be committed to our program goals and missions and be compassionate with our clients.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the transportation part of it, as far as what are some of the things that volunteers might be able to do as a senior companion? Where they would expect it to go or take folks to get to appointments, or what are some of the things that they do on the driving side of it?
Sure. So our senior companions volunteer with their clients up to 4 hours once per week. Our companions do a lot of transportation to medical appointments, dental appointments, foot clinic appointments, grocery shopping, transportation to local senior centers for meals, social activities, etc.
Okay, and generally how it happens is one person is assigned to someone and then they stick with that person as
Correct.
their companion. Okay, great. And is the service free to these folks?
The service is free to those folks. That is the luxury of the Senior Companion Program. With that, our senior companions do receive a small stipend, and their mileage is reimbursed at the federal rate.
Oh, that's great. Okay, and so since it's free and those volunteers do get some of that reimbursement, Linda, maybe could you talk a little bit about how the program is funded then?
Sure. Our funding is federal, and it comes from the Corporation for National and Community Service. And they fund programs that you might be familiar with, such as VISTA and AmeriCorps, and then the senior core programs fall under that, and that's Senior Companion, RSVP, and FGP. And then we also receive funding from non-federal partners as well, so some of our school districts and our county commission.
And how did this program get started?
Well, it started around, I believe, 37 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And so that was the time when Head Start was funded and foster grandparent, and it was, during the war on poverty. And so this program was funded shortly after that.
And the RMDC actually does a lot of things for seniors. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the other services that are offered for folks?
Sure. So we have our volunteer programs, and then we have the Senior Center, we have the Meals on Wheels program, we have the Commodities program for our seniors, and I believe that's once a month where they can get their commodities either delivered to them or they meet at a certain spot to pick it up. And then we have the Area Agency on Aging, and that they fund and administer quite a few different programs for people. They help people with insurance, Medicare, that type of thing.
And Meals on Wheels might be one too, where if someone isn't driving anymore, that would be a good resource for them to turn to. Are there other programs that you would think of that for those folks who are homebound or aren't driving anymore that they could take advantage of? Could you talk a little bit more about those?
Well, you know, we all work closely together within our agency, and so we're constantly referring clients back and forth to make sure that they do receive all the services that they're eligible for. You know, we try to cover that. You know, and then we also partner and work with agencies outside of Rocky too, you know, and we work with the Keeping You Home program out of the hospital, and you know, we work closely with APS through the welfare department.
Okay.
If we see a senior at risk, we want to make sure that they get help, so we'll make a referral.
Okay, great. And we're almost out of time, but just really quickly, for those folks, I think we've all heard of Meals on Wheels, but can you just talk about that really quickly for somebody who can't drive, how that program works?
If they can't drive, so a senior companion could bring them up to the congregate site where the meal is served.
Okay.
But if they're not able to do that, we just make sure that Shauna gets the information, and we make sure that the meals are delivered to that client.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much,
Thank
ladies,
you.
for your
You're
time.
welcome.
Appreciate you coming in. And thanks to all our guests on today's show, and thank you for joining us this week. We hope you enjoyed the show, and until next week, stay fit, stay well, and stay healthy for life with Healthy Living for Life. Have a good week.
Healthy Living for Life is brought to you by Mountain Pacific Quality Health. We'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions for future programs, visit our website at mpqhf.org or call us at 406-443-4020. You can also catch us on YouTube by visiting our website and clicking on the YouTube icon. Special thanks to Fire Tower Coffee House and Roasters. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions.